Elk hunting success usually starts and ends with one thing: finding elk. You can have the best gear, you can be the best caller, and you can even have the best legs in the unit. But if you're not where the elk want to be, not much of that matters. In this week's Thrive episode, I'm going to break down the 12 elk finding commandments. These are the core features that I want to stack up when I'm evaluating new hunt areas. We're not talking about silver bullets. We're talking about stacking the odds, building a strategy, and understanding how elk actually use the landscape. Whether you're brand new to elk hunting or you've punched a lot of tags, I think this episode is going to help you sharpen your edge. Let's get started. When it comes to elk hunting, finding elk is just about job one. Not much else matters if we can't pull this hat trick off. In this week's Western Spotlight, we are going to run down 12 core elk finding principles and how stacking them in your favor will lead to more success. Stacking these 12 elk finding features isn't just helpful, it's the cornerstone of finding elk consistently. This is the kind of edge that separates average hunters from the ones who fill tags year after year. Odds multiplying, the big picture. If you're like me, you don't stop thinking about elk season just because the calendar says it's spring. Elk hunting is a year-round obsession, or at least it should be. And if you want to break away from that average 6% success rate on public land, you need to start stacking odds, not just checking boxes. Finding elk is about multiplying odds. One of these core features alone does not dramatically increase your chances of finding elk, but when you find potential hunt areas that combine and stack these features, you significantly begin to multiply your chances of success. The Treeline Academy e-scouting elk course was built around identifying and isolating these core concepts, and entire modules are dedicated to each one of them. There is so much more to this entire hunt planning process, but it all begins with a solid understanding of these core principles. Today, my goal is to simply introduce you to those core concepts. Zones of pressure. I don't consider this one of the core elk finding features, but it does involve analyzing what we have previously defined as the zones of pressure. In the previous Thrive episode, we reviewed part of the digital pressure isolation process. Identifying the level of hunting pressure and predicting its sources requires understanding all access points, open and closed roads, established trails, and any geographical limitations within your hunt area. With this level of understanding, predictions can be made about where the hunting pressure will likely originate. Number 1, evaluating access points. Researching, identifying, and placing markup icons at every possible access in your entire hunt area is incredibly valuable. This may seem time-consuming and elementary at first, but working through the identification, placement, and pressure evaluation process will give you a very broad visual understanding of how recreation and hunters are accessing and using a particular hunt area. This high-resolution imagery evaluation technique helps you evaluate potential pressure spots. Ultimately, you will choose an access point or points that will maximize your approach to your hunting routes, your camps, and the other key markup points that you've identified during your e-scouting process. Number 2, trail use evaluation. This is similar to access point evaluation. Trail use evaluation is another task that is best done at home, pre-hunt, before you hit the backcountry. This type of evaluation, again, works best using the highest satellite aerial imagery zoom levels. The zoom levels that are available offline or within the standard hunt applications or platforms simply do not have the magnification or the resolution that is needed for this level of scrutiny. The Treeline Google Earth Pro Toolkit gives you access to the very specific tools that are needed for this level of detailed analysis. Number 3, elevation. Going as high as possible is not always the most successful formula when it comes to finding elk. It is more important to follow the quality and quantity of food sources and combining those with the 12 core elk finding features. Analyzing soil moisture levels before the hunt can prove to be extremely helpful. You need to zero in on those elevations that potentially offer the best food sources. Moisture versus elevation. What's the elk relationship? In high moisture years, elk will tend to stay higher longer into the season. In this scenario, the upper elevation feed stays green and nutritious deeper into the fall. The thermals plus reduced pressure often make these upper elevation spots very attractive to elk. In lower moisture or drought years, upper elevation forage can burn out very early in the season in that drier, arid air. the vegetation loses its nutritional value very fast. When this happens, elk tend to drop to those mid-elevation ranges where the soil holds better moisture and produces stronger food sources. Okay, but how do you evaluate moisture levels in your hunt area before the hunt? I just added a new feature to the Treeline Google Earth Pro toolkits. This new addition helps you analyze current moisture levels, which in turn will help you zero in on the optimal elevation zones within your hunt area. Number 4, meadows. In the elk course, we talk about specific meadow rules, and I usually live by them. For example, large meadows within 1 to 2 miles of any road or access point, and especially those that have marked or established trails leading to them, are simply hunter magnets. I like to look for those smaller chain meadows, pocket meadows, and those transitional meadows that lead up to those larger openings. Again, zeroing in on meadows located significantly off established trails. Use the high-resolution aerial photo views to identify those greener, brighter meadows that stand out during your specific hunt time frame. There is really only one tool again that you can use for that. There is so much to this core meadow evaluation concept. Number 5, canyons, creeks, and drainages. Look for canyons, creeks, and drainages without established trails in the bottom. Drainages that have those wider bottoms and interspersed openings or meadows should definitely not be ignored, especially those that run below an east or northern facing slope. Choosing the right drainage is a crucial hunt area evaluation decision. Number 6, historical burn areas and logging areas. When assessing burned areas, focus on the transitional zones, edge environments, and the perimeter areas in those larger burns. These can be fantastic focal points for elk. Edge habitat is a critical component to finding elk, and it is even more important with burns and other ground disruptions. Burned areas are not all created equal, and having the ability to break them down is an absolute odds multiplier. Multiple studies across the West have shown that elk actively seek out burned areas, especially within the first 7 to 10 years after a fire. Why is that? Because burns create a perfect mix of open terrain, regenerating forage, and edge habitat, the 3 main things that elk crave. Fire opens up the canopy, allowing sunlight to hit the ground, and this jumpstarts that new growth of grasses, forbs, and shrubs. Very high quality feed that often outperforms the forage in unburned timber. In fact, some studies in places like Montana, Idaho, and Colorado have shown elk densities to be significantly higher in post-burn areas, particularly during the late summer and early fall seasons. But burns do have a shelf life. Research also suggests that elk use peaks around that 7-year post-burn mark, and then it slowly declines unless the habitat is maintained through follow-up disturbance or it remains in that transitional sweet spot. Logged areas. Treat logged areas similar to burned areas. Look for connections, funnels, or pinch points between large logged areas, as elk tend to use them as travel corridors. Remember, logged areas tend to have easier access and many times will attract more hunters. In those larger logged areas, look for the more remote and roadless sections, especially those that have immediate access to the darkest and steepest timbered areas. Number 7, edge habitat. If there is one habitat that elk seem to prefer above all else, it's edge habitat. This is where 2 or more habitat types meet, like a burn meets the timber, meadow meeting a forest, or a logging cut bordering a creek drainage. Research across the western states has repeatedly shown that elk spend a disproportionate amount of time in or within very close proximity to an edge habitat. If you want to find more elk, start focusing more attention where the habitat types collide. Don't forget that elk prefer the inside or the timbered side from an edge exactly the same as the opening or the meadow side. This is a very important graph to remember. 8, beetle kill areas. Beetle killed areas, like regions affected by fires or logging, often serve as refuges for elk. Identifying beetle-killed zones and understanding their progression stages can be extremely challenging. The course includes a comprehensive module dedicated to assessing beetle kill areas, aging them, and then pinpointing the critical state or phase of those zones. Similar to burned or logging regions, factors such as thermal and sun protection and edge habitat features are crucial when it comes to evaluating beetle kill areas. Number 9. Slope orientation and steepness. During most archery elk seasons, I find that elk seem to seek out those northern or northerly facing slopes. In some cases, even eastern facing slopes. They also tend to prefer very specific slope steepness ranges, and you will need to learn how to evaluate them in your hunt areas. Sometimes finding elk in steeper country is a little easier than in rolling country. In steeper country, elk often funnel into more limited and predictable areas, making glassing much more effective. Rolling terrain, on the other hand, allows elk to scatter and disperse, which can make them more difficult to locate. The more hunting and predator pressure within a hunt area, the more you should be evaluating those steeper sloped areas. Did you know you can utilize specific layers in several of the hunting applications and platforms to identify, target, and isolate slope degree steepness ranges? Number 10, bench topography. Benches or flatter areas on these steeper slopes can be great holding spots for elk. Again, not all benches are created equal, and there are some very big differences. Elk prefer some benches much more than others. Prime bench areas can be used by elk year after year, making these great historical areas to find elk. The ability to understand and read detailed topography maps will take you a long way when it comes to isolating those prime historical bench areas. Number 11. Funnels and travel corridors. These are great ambush spots. Be sure to mark these areas during your e-scouting work. Funnels and saddles work together with many of the other elk finding features. When things get tough on a hunt or when hunting pressure becomes very high, these are great places to hang out. Number 12. Water sources. Water availability is obviously an important consideration. In some regions and states, it is more essential than in others. Studies from the U.S. Forest Service, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and several other academic field projects have consistently found that elk tend to stay within a half to 1 mile of a reliable water source, especially during early and mid-season archery hunts. If you're hunting those arid regions like New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, water becomes even more critical, a true anchor point for daily elk movement. The elk will also travel a lot further for water in these areas. In more moisture-rich regions like Montana, Wyoming, and parts of Idaho, yes, water is important, but it's more important to identify water-friendly terrain, not just any random creek or pond. The water feature is important, but in most of the states that I hunt, it is typically not a priority for me because the elk know where the water is, and it is not typically a very huntable feature. This obviously excludes elk wallows. The truth is, elk are where they are for a reason, and that reason is usually tied to a stack of overlapping core features. It's all connected. The best hunters I know aren't guessing, they're stacking odds intentionally. They're evaluating and eliminating, narrowing the focus, and building a plan that reflects how elk actually use the landscape, not how we hope they will. These 12 elk finding features are not silver bullets on their own, but when you combine them and layer them, they become the framework for solid hunt area evaluation. These core elk finding strategies will give you a real advantage when it comes to planning your hunts, and they will improve your odds of finding more elk. Let's face it, hope is not a strategy. PEAX is back with another killer hunt giveaway, and this one's headed south. If you missed your chance at the 2026 Spring Bear Hunt with me, here's your shot at redemption, an epic Texas aoudad hunt. To celebrate the launch of their very first feature film, $1 Million, PEAX is giving away this exact hunt to one lucky customer. Getting entered is simple. Every $10 you spend at PEAXequipment.com gets you one entry. Remember, any purchase over $50 also gets you entered to win the PEAX Cybertruck. You have so many ways to win. This isn't some far-off deadline either. Entries close on June 30th, so don't wait around. The full feature film is now available on the PEAX YouTube channel. I've included the direct link in the description below. While you're there, you can check out all the past Thrive Podcast episodes. Get entered and good luck. So many elk hunters show up with high hopes and no real plan. They pick a trailhead, they hike hard, and they hope to stumble into elk. And when it doesn't happen, they blame the weather, the moon, the wolves, anything but reality. The best hunters aren't just physically and mentally tough, they're intentional. They've learned to stack these core elk finding features and organize them into a working plan. More importantly, they work the plan. They adapt when it's not working, and they go in with confidence because they've already done the hard work. Hunters who consistently find elk, they're not lucky, they're intentional. I'll see you next time.